evening, everybody, and welcome to Chelmsford Tonight. This is the show where we highlight the people and places that make Chelmsford and the surrounding areas a great place to live and work. I'm Karen Woodrow, owner of Visiting Angels Senior Home Care right here in Chelmsford, and I'll be your host. Our first segment tonight is Gardens for Good, a community services project right here in Chelmsford. Gardens for Good is exactly what it sounds. They are gardens that allow increased access to healthy foods for everybody in the community, especially those that are feeling food insecurity. With me to talk about this project is Jen Melanson, Community Services Coordinator for the town of Chelmsford. Jen, welcome to Chelmsford Tonight.
Thank you, Karen. Good to be here and good to see you and be here in person with you. It's so exciting.
Jen and I were together during COVID. We did a little show where we tried to answer the community's questions about COVID, and it was all on Zoom. And so we have been very good friends for 2 years, and this is our first time in person. And I'm so happy to talk to you about this Gardens for Good project because 2 years ago when COVID started, there were sometimes you couldn't do the show, or we talked about gardening in the show because you were doing these Gardens for Good. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the project, how it started, and how it's transitioned over the past 2 years from, sort of in the middle of COVID when you were working on it and now.
Yeah. So, boy, COVID turned out to be a timely thing for the Gardens for Good. The idea for it came actually the previous fall in 2019. I hadn't been here in Chelmsford that long. I had started in July of 2019. And then in September of 2019, I became aware of the Greater Lowell Health Alliance and the fact that they do a community health needs assessment every 3 years. And 2019 was the end of their, end or beginning, depending on how you look at it, of their 3-year cycle. And they had just completed a new assessment and were publicizing that assessment. So I think that assessment came out in October of 2019. And so I had a good look at the data that was gathered through the GLHA. And when I was looking at the top health priority needs that members of the Chelmsford community had identified, I was really surprised to find out that increasing access to healthy foods was the number 2 priority that was identified by Chelmsford residents.
Well, and so healthy foods, everybody has a different interpretation of that, but really what we're talking about is fresh vegetables. I mean, that's the best way for people to eat healthy. And what an amazing way to have access to that is to build gardens right here in our own backyard. We have a picture of the Gardens for Good. And what I love about it is you made use of a parking lot.
Yeah.
And I was joking earlier, I said, they paved paradise to put up a parking lot, but you have planted a little bit of paradise in the town of Chelmsford office's parking lot.
Right. Yeah, so I decided when I had seen that needs assessment that I wanted to do something to try to increase access to healthy foods for our residents in Chelmsford. So that's how the community garden idea came about, and I started doing a lot of research into community garden projects. And the majority of the projects that I found literature on described community gardens in a way that most people think of community gardens, where you maybe rent a plot of land and you're
everybody
able to
does
farm
their
it
own
for
thing.
yourself. You do your own thing and you grow produce for your family. I wanted to do something different, and I wanted gardens that would grow produce for access with the entire community. So we were able, that first year, I was able to secure some very nice corporate donations and sponsorships to build just 6 raised bed gardens in the back parking lot behind Town Hall.
And then you got an additional grant, and we're up to how many beds?
We're up to 14 beds now with an additional grant from the GLHA. But the interesting thing is that the beds were first constructed, those initial 6 beds were first constructed in very, very early spring of 2020, so right around February and March of 2020, just as COVID was hitting. So, and when COVID hit, it really impacted our community in a big way, particularly with an increase in food insecurity in the community. So that's why I say that, COVID coming in at the time that we were just installing these gardens the timing couldn't have been better because this was a priority that was already identified the community, which only increased because of the pandemic. And
we were lucky because you garden outdoors, which we felt was safer, and you were able to produce food during a very demanding time for food insecurity. I know there's a huge stress on the food pantry and other places in the area. How do you distribute the food that's grown in these gardens?
Yeah, so we had a few ideas of how we wanted to do it, and then that morphed into how we could actually do it. And essentially what we did is we partnered with the food pantry, and we partnered with Table of Plenty, which is a community supper once a week that takes place at the senior center. It's been around for many, many years in Chelmsford, run by a tremendous group of volunteers. And with the pandemic, they were unable to continue to do a sit-down supper like they normally do at the senior center, and they transitioned to a grab-and-go meal that they would have people drive through the parking lot at the senior center and be able to pick up, prepackaged meals. So we decided to start distributing produce through Table of Plenty and bringing the produce that we grew in Gardens for Good over there on Tuesday nights, and the produce was distributed amongst the people who came to visit Table of Plenty. So that was 2020, how we initially started, and just with the 6 garden beds, so we weren't producing too much produce, but enough to be able to give out each week. The following year, last year in 2021, after we were able to secure the grant to expand the gardens and go from 6 to 14 beds, not only were we growing more produce, but we also partnered with an all-volunteer organization in town called Chelmsford Grow-A-Row, where backyard gardeners in town are encouraged to dedicate a portion of their backyard garden to grow produce to donate to be distributed to residents in town. So between the combined efforts of Garden for Good and Chelmsford Grow-A-Row, we were now able to supply produce to the food pantry one day a week. On Tuesdays, we supplied to Table of Plenty, and on Thursdays, we supplied through Chelmsford Senior Housing. So we would visit senior housing with the produce, go to a common area, lay it all out, and residents could come and literally shop for free for their produce.
That is fantastic, because I have a little garden, but like all my tomatoes come up the same day, and all of my eggplants the same day, and I'm like, how do I handle all this? And it's so nice to know that I have somewhere that I can donate this freshly grown produce to, where someone can make use of it. I love that Grow-A-Row program. That's really nice.
And that really started too from the first year that I had Gardens for Good, and I was just publicizing on social media about Gardens for Good and that I was growing produce to give away. I started having residents in Chelmsford contact me for the same reason that you described. I have so many tomatoes this week, I can't use them. I have too many cucumbers, can you take them? And I started driving around town. It was COVID, so people would leave their box of produce out by the mailbox, and I'd drive around and I'd pick it up and throw it in my car, and then that would get added to the donations. So the Grow-A-Row program is a more organized way that backyard gardeners can get involved in the program.
All right, Chelmsford community, let's take a look at the Gardens for Good and what was happening there probably just last week, we were planting the seedlings. Let's take a look. Maybe it'll give you some inspiration to save a row in your own garden. Why don't you tell us what's going on here?
Yeah, so we've partnered with a very small organization, kind of a one-woman show called Fresh Start Food Gardens. That's who did our initial builds on the gardens, built all the beds, and we contract them to provide yearly maintenance for us, and they do the planting and supplying of plants for us in the spring. So that's what you saw there. They were in last week doing the initial plantings for us. We have lettuce that will be ready to be harvested within 2 weeks, and then we've got tomatoes and cucumbers and green beans and carrots and a whole bunch of other things that have gone in that will start to produce as the season goes on.
So do you find that when people pull into the parking lot, they're kind of ready to snap a green bean or something for a little snack?
I do have a little deterrent with a sign that says there are cameras in use. And there is a little funny story about that. Last year we had a little shed building project that my husband and I did to build a shed to store all of the Gardens for Good supplies through the winter. And we were there on a Saturday building the shed, and I happened to notice a couple that was over by my green beans, and they were reaching over and picking, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna go take care of this, and I went wandering over, and I said, kind of in a very stern voice, can I help you? And they said, you were the Garden for Good volunteers picking today? Because I have an army of volunteers that come and harvest during the week for me. And this poor young couple were volunteers of mine that I didn't realize were supposed to be there that day.
And they got a slap on the wrist from
a little
Jen.
bit until I realized why they were there. So yeah, we do keep an eye on the gardens, and we haven't found theft to be an issue. Yeah.
Okay, all right, great. So our own Bob Pariseau went to visit your garden last year when they were harvesting some of the fruit. So let's take a look at some of the results that we're going to get, that we're hopefully going to see in a few months.
Yeah.
So these are patio peppers and a variety of different cherry tomatoes that I picked this morning. You can try them if you like.
Oh, okay, I'm going to try this one right here.
So this is
I really like peppers.
They look like they're hot peppers, but these are sweet red peppers. Isn't that good? Those are so
Very
good.
nice.
Wow, those look delicious.
Yeah, they're very popular.
Yeah, and there's nothing like eating, vegetables from a garden that's just been freshly picked, and it really sort of makes you a vegetable lover, and otherwise it's hard. So
Yeah, and our produce doesn't get stored for more than a couple days at a time before it goes right onto people's tables.
So access to healthy food, and it sounds like a great program. Thank you so much for bringing this program to our community and for joining me tonight on the show. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It was great to see you.
Good to see you too, Karen.
We'll be back with our next guest after this break.
Lori jolted out of a deep sleep, awakened by a loud rap followed by a deathly silence. All the normal household noises, the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the fan in the computer, and the furnace for the hot water heater cycling on and off had ceased, and the room was pitch black. Something was making her skin crawl. Sitting up in bed, she realized what it was. Once again, power had gone out. She contemplated pulling the covers over her head and going back to sleep, then heard a distinct knock on her door. A moment later, it became more of a pounding than a knock.
That was Becky Bronson, local area resident and writer, reading from her novel, When North Becomes South. Joining me tonight to talk about her career as a writer and about her current novel that's coming out soon, and this past novel, is Becky Bronson. Becky, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, welcome to Chelmsford Tonight. Thank you for reading that passage. I read the synopsis of your book, and it is not just a novel, it's not just fiction. There's a lot of science in the book. When North Becomes South references the poles of the Earth and the magnetic force, and you have a pretty interesting background for a fiction writer. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became a writer?
Okay. So I was a scientist by background. I was a biochemist. I have a PhD in biochemistry. And I got a PhD in 1986 from Boston University and worked at the Shriners Burn Institute in Boston for a while, worked for some biotech companies. And then after my first child was born, I took some time off and eventually decided I didn't want to go back into biotech, so I became a yoga teacher, opened a yoga studio, did that for about 15 years. And during that time, I really wanted to write, but I was running the business, so didn't have much time to do that. And then in 2017, my mom passed away. I turned 60. My father had passed away at age 60, and I really thought about what I want to do with my life. Like, what do I really want to do? And I realized I really wanted to write. And the yoga studio was just holding me back from doing that. So I sold the business. At the time, my son was working as a Peace Corps volunteer in Africa, in Liberia, and we went to visit him. And I just thought, I'm going to just go on this trip and find something to write about. I had no idea what. I didn't know fiction, nonfiction, whatever, but I just figured I'd find something to write about.
So what was it on that trip? Peace Corps is a very special program. We are a Peace Corps family. My husband did Peace Corps, and I understand what it takes to do something like that. He was in Liberia. I think we have a picture of him. He's working with children. And what was he working on, and what happened on that trip that sparked your creative writing?
So a couple of things happened, but the main thing was when we were with him, he lived in this rural village in Liberia with no running water, no electricity. And we stayed with him for a week. And before we went, I was very nervous about that. Like, how would I do? I hate camping, first of all, and I did not want to do that. But, you know, he's like, Mom, we'll be fine. I remember talking about him. I had texted him and said, you know, do you have like a shelf on your bathroom? If I bring like a mirror or something to go over your sink, could you use that? And he said, there's no sink in the bathroom, Mom. You know, there's basically a toilet and, you know, a little.
So you were going to face a whole different world.
Yeah.
So you were really getting out of your comfort zone there, I think.
Very much. So when we got there, I was amazed at how he functioned and how we functioned there. Like, it just worked. And it was much easier than I thought it would be. And so I was really struck by just how people adapted, how we adapted, and how they adapted, the people there. And I was particularly struck by the kids and how they were with us. We would sit down for lunch and be surrounded by kids all the time. And they were very, very interested in us. They were asking us questions, peppering us with questions about the United States and all sorts of things. And I was thinking, you know, back in this country, surrounded by a bunch of teenagers, they wouldn't be doing that. They'd be like in their devices, like, you know, glued to them. But they didn't have devices there. So that was a big thing that I noticed. And when we came back here, I thought a lot about that. And I thought about technology. And I thought about how we'd function, you know, without our technology and our devices and how kids would function and all that. And, you know, I remember asking my husband, you know, what if power went out here? Like, what if power went out worldwide? We wouldn't be able to function. It would be chaos here. But in Liberia, they might not even know for a few days because they don't have the things that we have.
And that's actually the framework of your book. It's about a family living in suburban Connecticut, feeling very comfortable in their way of life, with a son in Liberia, without electricity, near the equator, not feeling any of these changes, but the rest of the family is really having to deal with the struggle.
Yeah, yeah. So that sparked the book. That was kind of what got me thinking about it, and I thought a lot about it. I at the time had joined a writer's support group. I was writing some nonfiction things about our trip. I was writing a lot, and this writer's support group was a bunch of fiction writers. And somewhere along the line, I said to them, I really want to write this story, and I don't know where to start. Like, I had never written fiction, and they just said to me, write what you know, like start with what you know. And I thought, well, okay, I know me, I know my son in Liberia, and I've been there. So that was kind of where I started. That was the jump off point. And once I got going, the story took on a life of its own. So.
And I love how you put your science background into it about the magnetic field, and I found that so interesting. I love that you mixed the science facts with this fiction and created the story. Now you have another book coming out. This book came out in 2020, and you have another book coming out 2 years later, June 2022. Why don't you give us a little bit of a hint about what we can expect from that?
So that book is called Trapped in Paradise. Paradise spelled Paradice. It's not a typo. It's about the online gambling industry, and it's really a story about kind of a little bit about greed, corruption, how that industry operates, just about things that we need to be aware of as a population, about how we're manipulated by technology in a sense. So a little different from this book, but it's still about the whole issue of technology and how it can be a wonderful thing and also has a dark side to it.
So again, you've taken science and the knowledge, and you've taken you've woven all into this fiction story to hopefully make us all realize what we're about and what makes us tick and how we can be better people.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Becky. I really appreciate you coming on Chelmsford Tonight and sharing your beautiful words with us, and we look forward to hearing about the success of your next book. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We'll be back after this break. Our next guests are Lisa Tiano and Jacob Lazar. Welcome to Chelmsford Tonight.
Thank you.
So Lisa is the music teacher here at Parker Middle School and the orchestra director, and Jacob is an 8th grader and first chair violinist. Now they're joining me directly from the Woo Sox game in Worcester. What did you guys do there?
We performed the National Anthem of America for the game, and then we sat and watched the rest of it.
Well, that sounds like a treat for everybody in the audience. They get to see a Woo Sox game and they get to see the Parker Middle School perform the national anthem. That sounds really nice. But we're not here really to talk about that. We're here to talk about the very last concert that the orchestra did here in Parker Middle School to end the school year. And fortunately for us, Pete Pedulla was there filming the concert for all the parents and for prosperity.
Yeah.
And fortunately, he did not click the camera off right when the concert ended because something happened as the auditorium was starting to clear. Jacob came forward with a little bit of announcement, so let's watch here and see what happened.
Thank you so much for being the best audience, and great job tonight, kids. And have a great evening.
Actually, before everyone leaves, could we have the 5th, 6th, 7th graders and all 8th graders not designated to play right now please exit the stage? For all of you who don't know me, my name is Jacob Lazar, and I am the first chair violinist of the Parker 7th and 8th grade orchestra. This is our last concert that we are performing for Miss Tiano, and in light of that, we decided to write her a song.
So Jacob, tell us what happened. Like you totally surprised your teacher. You tell us what went on behind the scenes at school with you and your classmates.
So I had been planning to make this song a few months before the concert, and I initially thought that I would put a bunch of pieces together, and that's what I did. And the whole speaking at that point of the concert was entirely improv on my part. I had a vague idea of what I was going to say beforehand. I just knew I had to say something before everyone left.
So you have a special relationship with your orchestra director, and you decided to work with your classmates to put together you did a composition. You were like a composer, and you actually put notes down on music. On sheet music right here. We have a picture of it, and it's called Mrs. Tiano's Scrapbook. And it's a musical scrapbook of all the pieces that she taught you guys over the year. And how long did it take you guys to compose this piece and practice it?
So there are a few stages that went into putting it together. First, I needed to get all of the different parts because there are 4 different instruments and I think 20 or so different songs that I needed for each part. And that
You had a prolific year of teaching, didn't you?
Well, it's over their 4 years.
Oh,
that
they're
they
4?
have me. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
That's okay.
So that took like 4 or so weeks to get all of those. And I really didn't get all of them by the end of it. I had to fill in a few blanks. The second part was I needed to cut up pieces of each song and put them together so that they worked nicely. That part involved organizing each piece by key and then putting the chords together so that they would flow nicely into each other. And I think that was the most difficult part of putting it together. And that took 2 or 3 days. And then after that came one of the most tedious parts, I think, of putting it together, which was I did this in a music software called Noteflight. So essentially, I took the pieces of the songs that I had made, and I put them in, note by note, into this music software, which I did it in 2 sessions. One of them was 12 hours long. The other one was 6 hours.
And this is all while you're studying for finals and wow.
And then the last part, I think, was the most problematic of the piece, which was distributing it without Miss Tiano realizing, and then practicing it without her realizing.
Wow, that is definitely a labor of love. And the best part for you probably had to have been her reaction when she heard about this. And again, we were able to capture that on tape. So let's see Mrs. Tiano's reaction to this composition in her honor.
This piece has been quite an issue to get to this position. If the effort of getting all of the pieces together and the 18 hours of consecutive work spent putting it on paper wasn't enough, we have also only had 2 rehearsals for this piece. Thank you.
So Lisa, now that you've had time to digest this surprise and that you've had a chance to listen to the music, listen to the kids perform it, and see the sheet music, tell us about your feelings at that time and why you're feeling now about it. And
Well, at first when I was on stage, I was still processing it, trying to understand what was going on. I had so much going on at the time. And then when Jacob was explaining what he did, it started just like overwhelm me with emotion. Jacob was in 5th grade, I think, when I was doing my master's on composition and its effect on reading in the orchestra. So I think that's when you got introduced to Noteflight. And I looked over the shoulder and I saw what had happened and how amazingly spectacular all the songs flowed perfectly together, key-wise, everything. I mean, it just blew me away. And then afterwards, when we were in class and I asked to see the piece and they played it for me, I'm looking at it and I'm going page by page going, the thought process to go through this and do this as a musician myself would have been a lot to do. And Jacob has always been one of those students that goes above and beyond in class too. And he's at orchestra club and I turn around and he's doing a fiddle tune or he's got a duet going or like when we were doing the national anthem, he'll turn around and say, "Can I take it up an octave?" And I said, "Absolutely, go right ahead." So, and it just, everything sort of was like emotional because this group of kids went through so much between COVID and hybrid learning and remote learning, and I wasn't sure if they were picking up what I was doing because it's a group thing you do live together, but yet you have to do it on a little screen and you can't hear each other when you're doing it. And it just made it real that they did catch on. They were really enjoying it, and I can't say enough about the students here at Parker and in the orchestra and Jacob. It was just an honor, an absolute honor.
wow, that's really beautiful. I mean, you used to make like a mixtape, right? But this is so much more complicated, it sounds like, because you have the notes. You said one song had to flow into another, and it's really a masterpiece. So let's take a moment and listen to this compilation of Mrs. Tiano's scrapbook. Thank you for sharing your story with us. It was really a sweet tribute to a teacher, and good luck at the high school next year, Jacob.
Thank you.
And that's our show. I hope you've gotten some inspiration from our guests tonight. Good night, everybody.